Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to day 19 of our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam. We are in the third canto. This is our 19th day. On the third canto, we are in the 7th chapter, just beginning the 15th the third section from verse 15. Right, okay, so let's get started with our prayers. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Niravishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Shatarane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchkalpatarubhyas cha kripa sindubhya eva cha Patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. All right, so yes, chapter 7 of the third canto is titled Further Inquiries by Vidura. And as we said, we're beginning with verse 15 today. The section is from verse 15 to verse 20, and we've titled it, Vidura Appreciates Maitreya's Answers. Right, so let's get into it. So verse 15 to verse 20, we will read the verses first. Right, so verse 15. Vidura said, O powerful sage, my Lord, all my doubts about the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entities have now been removed by your convincing words. My mind is now perfectly entering into them. Verse 16. O learned sage, your explanations are very good, as they should be. Disturbances to the conditioned soul have no other basis than the movement of the external energy of the Lord. Verse 17. Both the lowest of fools and he who is transcendental to all intelligence enjoy happiness, whereas persons in between them suffer the material pangs. Verse 18. But, my dear sir, I'm obliged to you, because now I can understand that this material manifestation is without substance, although it appears real. I am confident that by serving your feet, it will be possible for me to give up the false idea. Verse 19. By serving the feet of the spiritual master, one is enabled to develop transcendental ecstasy in the service of the personality of Godhead, who is the unchangeable enemy of the Madhu demon, and whose service vanquishes one's material distresses. And last verse in the section, verse 20, persons whose austerity is meager can hardly obtain the service of the pure devotees who are progressing on the path back to the kingdom of Godhead, the Vaikunthas. Pure devotees engage 100% in glorifying the Supreme Lord, who is the Lord of the demigods and the controller of all living entities. So let's go through with the purports. Vidura appreciates Maitreya's answers. And verse 15. Vidura said, O powerful sage, my Lord, all my doubts about the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entities have now been removed by your convincing words. My mind is now perfectly entering into them. Right, let's have a look at the purport. So Prabhupada, first of all, talks about the science of Krishna, science of God and the living entities. It's so subtle that even someone like Vidura, very advanced devotee, Yamaraj, and just very special devotee. So even someone like Vidura has to consult with someone like Maitreya. Yeah. So the doubts about the eternal relationship of the Lord with the living entities, these doubts are created by mental speculators. But the fact is, the basic point, is that the nature of that relationship is one of predominator and predominated. And, of course, there's no doubt about it. The predominator is the Lord. So, real knowledge of this relationship entails reviving our lost consciousness of it. And the process for doing that is devotional service to Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, by clearly understanding from authorities like the sage Maitreya, one can become situated in real knowledge, and the disturbed mind can thus be fixed on the progressive path. 16. O learned sage, your explanations are very good, as they should be. Disturbances to the conditioned soul have no other basis than the movement of the external energy of the Lord. Okay, let's look at the purport. It's just a short-ish purport. So, very, very foundational point which we've come across so many times already, and we're going to come across more and more times as we progress through the Bhagavatam. The root cause of the material world, of the whole manifestation, is the living entity's desire to become one with the Lord in every respect. Otherwise, what's the material world for the Lord? He has the spiritual world, where life is eternal, full of bliss and full of knowledge. What does he need the material world, where everything is temporary, full of misery and ignorance? He's got no need for it. But it serves a purpose. It serves a few purposes in regard to the living entities, the conditioned souls, and their difficulties, that the living entity, wanting to become one with the Lord, or even sometimes greater than the Lord, that's his desire. But instead of achieving that, the conditioned souls suffer so much misfortune in material life. Even great souls like Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva. Brihad Bhagavatamrita describes the difficulties they face, and ultimately they die because they're here in this material world. So the Lord, of course, the Lord's the predominator of Maya. The living entities are predominated, and the false attempt by us to take the predominating position is the cause of our material bondage. And Prabhupada concludes the purport. It's kind of shortish. It's a short purport. That the living entities attempt to become one with the Lord is the last snare of Maya. Verse 17. This is an interesting one, subtle. Both the lowest of fools and he who is transcendental to all intelligence, they both enjoy happiness, whereas the persons in between them suffer the material pangs. So it's a very interesting point, and it's an important point, that the lowest of fools don't understand they're suffering the material miseries. They're almost on the level of animals, and because they're determined to just somehow find enjoyment, although they're just failing and failing at every step, failing to find enjoyment, but still they just persist in trying because they don't understand the reality that you can't really enjoy here no matter how hard you try. It's always miserable. And of course, Prabhupada gives the example of a hog, and in principle it's the same as the example of us. The hog feels happy, engaged in lots of sex life, but he doesn't realize his degradation. He's a hog. I mean, what human being wants to be a hog? So similarly, same point, humans who are unaware of the reality of the miseries of material existence, but they just feel they're happy in sex life and hard work, they are the lowest of fools. But because they have no clear sense, no clear understanding or idea of the miseries, they feel they're enjoying some happiness. And of course, that's all they know. So until they receive some of Prabhupada's books or in one way or another get the association of devotees, they just cannot understand there is an alternative, and what to speak of a much better alternative. Yeah, so they try to enjoy, and they get a little enjoyment, but it's really just a little. But still they think this is it. This is all there is to do in life. There's nothing else. So in other words, the pure devotees, of course, the great devotees, they're just in ecstasy, even in the material world. Even like Prahlad Maharaj, he was being abused by his father in so many ways, but he was just constantly in ecstasy. Then the fools, these people we've just been talking about, they think they're happy. Actually, they're struggling in so many ways, but they think they're happy. So, but anyway, the people who are not like animals in human forms, nor are they the Paramahamsas, the elevated pure devotees, they feel the material pangs. And they're aware that this is no good. They're aware of these things. So it's them who need to inquire about the supreme truth. Anyway, so therefore Vedanta Sutra states, Atato Brahma Jigyasa, now in the human form of life, we should inquire about Brahman. So Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, this inquiry is necessary for those who are between the Paramahamsas and the fools. The fools who have forgotten the question of self-realization in the midst of life and sense gratification. Right, verse 18. But, my dear sir, I am obliged to you because now I can understand that this material manifestation is without substance, although it appears real. I'm confident that by serving your feet, it will be possible for me to give up the false idea. Okay, there's a short purport here. Conditioned soul's sufferings are superficial and no real value or meaning. And Prabhupada gives the example, like the cutting off of one's head in a dream. You remember we read about that the other day. There was one mischievous schoolboy, and the teacher, in order to control him, told him that if you don't watch, we'll cut your head off, hang it up on the wall, and then you'll be able to see, look what happened to my head. Which, is a pretty stupid idea, because if your head's cut off, you are instantly dead, and you won't be able to evaluate anything or see your head. You'll just be finished. So, but anyway, the thing is, and Prabhupada makes this point, and it's really so important, that although this is true, it's just so true, but it's very hard for the common man or the neophyte in Krishna consciousness to realize it practically, even though the devotees are preaching about it. Still, it's very difficult for them to realize practically. But however, by serving great devotees like Maitreya and associating with them, then eventually one can give up the false idea that the soul suffers from material pangs. He doesn't exactly, because he's not part of the material situation. So he's just by nature transcendental. Verse 19. By serving the feet of the spiritual master, one is enabled to develop transcendental ecstasy in the service of the personality of Godhead, who is the unchangeable enemy of the Madhu demon, and whose service vanquishes one's material distresses. That's wonderful, isn't it? Yeah, that's really wonderful. So Prabhupada makes the point, first point, association with a bona fide spiritual master like Maitreya or like Prabhupada absolutely helps achieve transcendental attachment for devotional service. The Lord, and the Lord's addressed here as the enemy, the unchangeable enemy of the Madhu demon, or in other words, the enemy of the sufferings of his pure devotees. So Srila Prabhupada brings out the point just before the halfway point in the purport. The word rati rasa is significant because service to the Lord is performed in the different rasas, the 5 rasas: neutral, servitude, friendly, parental, and conjugal. So a liberated living entity engaged in service to the Lord finds himself or herself becoming attracted to one of these rasas, these mellows, which we just mentioned: neutral, servitorship, friendly, parental, and conjugal. And as the devotee becomes attracted to one of the mellows, one of those rasas, then one's service attachment to the material world is automatically vanquished. And Prabhupada refers to Bhagavad Gita chapter 2 verse 59, just briefly, doesn't go through the whole thing, but rasavarjam rasopyasya param drishtva navartate, that as you get the higher taste in devotional service, then the lower taste, which is there in material things, one just loses interest in it. That attachment to the material taste is automatically vanquished. All right, verse 20, the last verse in this section. Persons whose austerity is meager can hardly obtain the service of the pure devotees who are progressing on the path back to the kingdom of Godhead, the Vaikunthas. Pure devotees engage 100% in glorifying the Supreme Lord, who is the Lord of the demigods and the controller of all living entities. Okay, so let's go through the purport. It's not a big purport. So the authorities, transcendental authorities, recommend that serving the Mahatma, transcendentalists, the great devotees, that's the path of liberation. And Bhagavad Gita, of course, says that the pure devotees, or says that rather the Mahatmas are the pure devotees. This term is used here. It applies to the pure devotees. So, yeah, the Mahatmas, they're the pure devotees. They're on their ways. They're on their ways back to Godhead, Vaikuntha. They're always chanting and hearing the glories of the Lord. They don't bother with getting into dry philosophy. We've mentioned before that Lord Chaitanya, when he received initiation, then just the first thing he did after he had, like just the moment after he'd been initiated, was ask, what should I do now? And Ishvarapuri, the spiritual man, he actually, Lord Chaitanya asked Ishvarapuri, should I take part in philosophical discussions about the absolute truth, indicating with impersonalists? And Ishvarapuri responded that no, don't do that, but what you must do is Harir Nam, Harir Nam, Harir Nam Eva Kevalam, Kalo Nastyeva, 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 Gatir Anyata. Just chant the holy names, chant the holy names, chant the holy names. In Kali Yuga, there's no other way, no other way, no other way for deliverance from this world, material world. Right. So that's the recommendation here. Associate with the Mahatmas, the great, the pure devotees. And when you do, then you'll see they're always chanting and hearing about the glories of the Lord. They're not into dry philosophy. And if you associate with them, you'll just naturally be drawn into these discussions. And it's just wonderful. And this system, this has been the system, if we may put it that way. This has been the system for spiritual advancement, becoming liberated since time immemorial. But in Kali Yuga, it's even, in any yuga, chanting and hearing the glories of the Lord is the best thing. But in Kali Yuga, Lord Chaitanya especially recommends it, and as that verse we just chanted says, that in Kali Yuga it's the only way. So Prabhupada says, even if you have no assets of austerity, if you take shelter of the Mahatmas, the pure devotees who are hearing and chanting, you are sure to make progress back home, back to Godhead. Let's go on to the next section, section 4. Vidura wants to know of the further aspects of creation. Wow, that's interesting. So it's a long section, 21 verses. Let's read through all the translations. 21. After creating the total material energy, the Mahatattva, and thereby manifesting the gigantic universal form with senses and sense organs, the Supreme Soul entered within it. 22. The Purusha incarnation lying on the causal ocean is called the original Purusha in the material creations, and in his Virat form, in whom all the planets and their inhabitants live, he has many thousands of legs and hands. In his Virat form, his universal form. 23. O great Brahman, you have told me that the gigantic Virat form and his senses, sense objects, and 10 kinds of life air exist with 3 kinds of life vigor. Now, if you will, kindly explain to me the different powers of the specific divisions. Verse 24. O my Lord, I think that the process manifest in the forms of sons, grandsons, and family members has spread all over the universe in different varieties and species. 25. O learned Brahman, please describe how the leader of all the demigods, namely Prajapati, Brahma, decided to establish the various Manus, the heads of the ages. Please describe the Manus also, and please describe the descendants of those Manus. That's quite a bit to be described. 26. O son of Mitra, kindly describe how the planets are situated above the earth as well as underneath it. And also please mention their measurement as well as that of the earthly planets. 27. Also please describe the living beings under different classifications: the subhumans, humans, those born of the embryo, those born of perspiration, those who are those who are twice born, the birds, and the planets and vegetables. Please describe their generations and subdivisions also. 28. Please also describe the incarnations of the material modes of nature, Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshwar, and please describe the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his magnanimous activities. 29. O great sage, kindly describe the divisions and orders of human society in terms of symptoms, behavior, and the characteristics of mental equilibrium and sense control. Also, please describe the births of the great sages and the categorical divisions of the Vedas. 30. Please also describe the expansions of different sacrifices and the paths of mystic powers, analytical study of knowledge and devotional service, all with their respective regulations. 31. Please also describe the imperfections and contradictions of the faithless atheists, the situation for crossbreeding, and the movements of the living entities in various species of life according to their particular modes of nature and work. 32. You may also describe the non-contradictory causes of religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and salvation, and also the different means of livelihood and different processes of law and order, as mentioned in the revealed scriptures. 33. Please also explain the regulations for offering respects to the forefathers, the creation of the Pitriloka, the time schedule in the planets, stars and luminaries, and their respective situations. 34. Please also describe the fruitive results of charity and penance, and of digging reservoirs of water. Please describe the situation of persons who are away from home, and also the duty of a man in an awkward position, or a woman also. 35. O sinless one, because the personality of Godhead, the controller of all living entities, is the father of all religion and all those who are candidates for religious activities, kindly describe how he can be completely satisfied. 36. O best among the Brahmins, those who are spiritual masters are very kind to the needy. They're always kind to their followers, disciples, and sons, and without being asked by them, the spiritual master describes all that is knowledge. 37. Please describe how many disillusions there are for the elements of material nature, and who survives after the dissolution to serve the Lord while he's asleep. Gosh, there's a ton of information here. 38. Or requests for information on a ton of things, put it that way. 38. What are the truths regarding the living entities and the Supreme Personality of Godhead? What are their identities? What are the specific values in the knowledge in the Vedas? And what are the necessities for the spiritual master and his disciples? 39. Spotless devotees of the Lord have mentioned the source of such knowledge. How could one have knowledge of devotional service and detachment without the help of such devotees? Yeah, I mean, this is such a powerful part of the Bhagavatam. And verse 40, my dear sage, I've put all these questions before you with a view to knowing the pastimes of Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You are the friend of all, so kindly describe them for all those who have lost their vision. And verse 51, the last verse in the section. 41, O spotless one, your answers to all these questions will grant immunity from all material miseries. Such charity is greater than all Vedic charities, sacrifices, and penances, etc. Okay, so let's go through it in detail. Section 4. Vidura wants to know of the further aspects of creation. And of course, that's verse 21 to verse 41. So here's verse 21. After creating the total material energy, the Mahatattva, and thereby manifesting the gigantic universal form with senses and sense organs, the Supreme Lord entered within it. There's a very short one-sentence purport here. I'll just read the whole thing. Fully satisfied by the answers of the sage Maitreya, Vidura wanted to understand the remaining portions of the creative function of the Lord, and he took the clue from the previous topics. 22. The Purusha incarnation lying on the causal ocean is called the original Purusha in the material creations, and in his Virat form, in whom all the planets and their inhabitants live, he has many thousands of legs and hands. So Srila Prabhupada gives a one-sentence purport to this verse. The first Purusha is Karanadakshay Vishnu. The second Purusha is Garbhadakshay Vishnu. And the third Purusha is Kshirodakshay Vishnu, in whom is contemplated the Virat Purusha, the gigantic form in which all the planets, with their different developments and inhabitants are following. 23. O great Brahman, you have told me that the gigantic Virat form and his senses, sense objects, and 10 kinds of life air exist with 3 kinds of life vigor. Now, if you will, kindly explain to me the different powers of the specific divisions. Wow, Vidura's he's trying to help us. Because he doesn't really need to know this stuff. He already knows this. He's already on the level of pure devotional service, basically. 24. O my Lord, I think that the process manifest in the forms of sons, grandsons, and family members has spread all over the universe in different varieties and species. 25. O learned Brahman, please describe how the leader of all the demigods, namely Prajapati Daksha, decided to establish the various Manus, the heads of the ages. Please describe the Manus also, and please describe the descendants of those Manus. Right, so there's a purport here. To verse 25, extremely short purport. The human race, or Manushya Sara, descends from the Manus, sons and grandsons of the Prajapati, Brahma. The descendants of Manu reside in all the different planets and rule all the universe. That's interesting, isn't it? 26. O son of Mitra, kindly describe how the planets are situated above the earth as well as underneath it. And also please mention their measurement as well as that of the earthly planets. Let's have a look at that purport. Mundaka Upanishad is quoted, Yasmin vigyate sarvam evam vigyatam bhavati, that the devotee knows everything material and spiritual, all in relationship with the Lord. So then the devotees are not simply emotional, as less intelligent philosophers say, like when Lord Chaitanya was chanting, spreading Sankirtan in Varanasi, and Prakashananda Saraswati, he met with Prakashananda Saraswati, and Prakashananda, the first thing, not first thing, but very close to the first thing he said was, why are you're a sannyasi, why are you engaged just chanting and dancing with common people who are very emotional? But Krishna consciousness is not like that. There's a huge amount of literature, philosophy, and all these things, culture, and that's what we are doing, of course. So yeah, the less intelligent philosophers, generally the impersonalists, they don't understand why the devotees are so emotional, so blissful, ecstatic, and why they just go and associate with everyone to give everyone Krishna consciousness. So anyway, just concluding this little purport, that the devotees, the direction of the devotees is practical. They know all the details of the Lord's domination of creation. And on to verse 37. Also, please describe the living beings under different classifications, subhumans, humans, those born of the embryo, those born of perspiration, those who are twice born, the birds, and the plants and vegetables. Kindly describe their generations and subdivisions also. Yeah, so please describe the incarnations of, this is 28, please also describe the incarnations of the material modes of nature, Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshwara. And please describe the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his magnanimous activities. So there's a short purport here, verse 28. Although Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva are principal deities for creation, etc., they're not the final authorities. They could be in the sense that if they just repeat what the Lord says, then they become sort of final authorities, greater authorities. But anyway, ultimately, the Lord is the final authority. He's the ultimate goal, the cause of all causes. And he is Ashraya, or the final rest of everything. Verse 29. O great sage, kindly describe the divisions and orders of human society in terms of symptoms, behavior, and the characteristics of mental equilibrium and sense control. Also, please describe the births of the great sages and the categorical divisions of the Vedas. Right. So let's go through the purport of verse 29. The Varnashram positions, Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra, Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyasi, they're all divisions of quality, education, culture, and spiritual advancement attained by practicing control of the mind and the senses. And of course, they're based on the nature of the person, not on their birth. And a point is, Prabhupada makes the point, that birth is not mentioned here at all. in terms of qualification, because the person's birth is immaterial. And of course, Vidura is a classic example, born as the child of a Sudra woman. But actually, he is more than a Brahmin by qualification, because he's a disciple of the great sage Maitreya. So Prabhupada goes on, unless one becomes at least qualified as a Brahmin, one can't understand the Vedic hymns. Mahabharata is also part of the Vedas, but it's not part of the Vedic hymns, Rig, Sama, Yajur, and Atharva Vedas. That's what is being indicated when Prabhupada says the Vedic hymns. Yeah, it's those verses from the four Vedas, and they can't be approached by people who are not qualified as Brahmins. But Mahabharata is also part of the Vedas, but it's meant for people on lower levels, women, Sudras, Dvija Bandhus. Dvija Bandhu means people who, particularly men, but people who were born in families in the three higher Varnas, Brahman, Kshatriya, and Vaishya, but they've become degraded or, fallen down into improper activity, or maybe they never came up. They never learnt what they were meant to learn in the process of developing. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the less intelligent section of society can avail themselves of the Vedic instructions. All that information which is available in the hymns is available in Mahabharata in a more digestible form for people who are not very qualified. Okay, verse 30. Please also describe the expansions of different sacrifices and the paths of mystic powers, analytical study of knowledge, and devotional service, all with their respective regulations. So in the purport, Prabhupada says the word tantram is significant in the verse itself. It's in the last line of the verse, first word. Sometimes tantram is misunderstood to be black arts. Yes. That people who really, they want to enjoy in really low-class, gross sense gratification. But actually here, Tantra means the science of devotional service, as compiled by Narada. And that, this term Tantra, it's applied in different ways. Some really low-class, like just blatantly sexual. But otherwise, Tantra also means worship. It also indicates devotional service. So one can actually progress in devotional service by following these explanations, like what Narada gave, and as Maitreya is going to explain. So then, interesting point, the Sankhya philosophy enunciated by Kapila Dev, the son of Devahuti, is the real source of knowledge about the Supreme Truth. And in the same third canto, just in a little while, we're going to meet Kapila, and gradually he's going to give his instructions about the Absolute Truth, and it's really wonderful. So that knowledge is not based on mental speculation, the knowledge coming from Kapila, but the knowledge which is not based on the Sankhya of Kapila is mental speculation and can give no profit. Right, verse 31. Please also describe the imperfections and contradictions of the faithless atheists, the situation of crossbreeding, and the movements of the living entities in various species of life according to their particular modes of nature and work. So, interesting point, Prabhupada says, let me just read it. The combination of living entities in different modes of material nature is called crossbreeding. Okay. Anyway, the faithless atheists do not believe in the existence of God, and thus their philosophies are contradictory. They never agree with each other. And in fact, those who are Munis, philosophers like that, in order to be accepted as one of the Munis, one of the real philosophers, you have to produce a new philosophy which disagrees with all the existing ones. That's there, and Prabhupada concludes the little purport by saying, different species of life are evidence of varieties of mixtures of the modes of material nature. Okay, so verse 32. You may also describe the non-contradictory causes of religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and salvation, and also the different means of livelihood and different processes of law and order as mentioned in the revealed scriptures. So there's no purport here. Let's go on to verse 33. Please also explain the regulations for offering respects to the forefathers, the creation of the Pitriloka, the time schedule in the planets, stars, and luminaries, and their respective situations. Prabhupada in the purports makes the important point, the durations of days and night, as well as months and years in different planets, stars, luminaries, etc., they're different. The duration of their days, their nights, their months, their years are different in the different planets. And in that regard, it's said that 6 months on earth are equal to 1 day on the higher planets. Yes. So Bhagavad Gita says that 1 day in Brahma Loka is 1,000 times the 4 yugas. How's that? 4,300,000 years multiplied by 1,000 is 4,300,000,000 of our years. Is 1 day means the daylight portion of a day in Brahmaloka. And the month and the year there can be calculated in the same way. Verse 34. Please also describe the fruitive results of charity and penance and of digging reservoirs of water. Please describe the situation of persons who are away from home and also the duty of a man in an awkward position. There's just a very short purport, 1 sentence. Prabhupada says, the digging of reservoirs of water for public use is a great work of charity, and retiring from family life after 50 years of age is a great act of penance performed by the sober human being. Verse 35. O sinless one, because the personality of Godhead, the controller of all living entities, is the father of all religion and all those who are candidates for religious activities, kindly describe how he can be completely satisfied. Prabhupada explains all religious activities are ultimately meant to satisfy the Supreme Lord. He's the father of all religious principles. And Prabhupada refers to Bhagavad Gita chapter 7, verse 16, which talks of 4 kinds of pious men: the needy, the distressed, the enlightened, and the inquisitive. These 4 types of men approach the Lord in devotional service. And their devotion is mixed with material affection. Yeah. But above them are the pure devotees, who are not tainted by fruit of work or mental speculation. And then even here, Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, verse 15 is mentioned. It talks of the demons who throughout their lives are bereft of knowledge, despite their academic degrees, etc. So they are never candidates for satisfying the Lord. Okay, devotees, we'll do one more verse 36, and then we'll carry on with the rest of the chapter tomorrow. It's not much more, but it will take 5, probably 10 minutes. So let's just read this verse 36. O best among the Brahmins, those who are spiritual masters are very kind to the needy. They're always kind to their followers, disciples, and sons. And without being asked by them, the spiritual master describes all that is knowledge. So, there's a short purport here. So there are many subjects which we can learn and which we must learn from the spiritual master. Yeah, for the spiritual master, his followers, disciples, and like sons, like biological sons, are on one level. And he's always kind to them and always instructs them on transcendental subjects. And even sometimes if they don't ask, he just starts talking and giving them important instruction on transcendence. And Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, Vidura appealed to Maitreya Muni to speak on subjects about which he might not have asked. All right, devotees, we'll finish there. We'll carry on tomorrow with verse 37. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.